Welcome back to the stage, Cresta's Chief Marketing Officer, Russell Benzon.
Hello, hello. Folks, we are in the absolute final stretch here. So again, I just want to thank you all for staying engaged, staying lively. If you're out in the coffee room, I invite you to come back on in. We're going to be wrapping up with a pretty tremendous closing session here. I'm about to invite up Molly Bloom to share her story. The way that we're going to run this is she'll come out and she'll share for a little bit, okay? And then I'll come out and I'll do a couple of questions with Molly. But I want you to start to think about what questions you all would want to ask her. Because a big part of this thing is keeping it tight-knit. We don't got like a huge crowd here, so we want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might want to ask Molly. I feel like you're going to be ready. Alrighty, so folks, again, if you are out grabbing coffee, I invite you to come back into the room. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a few moments here. So again, if you're just finding your seat, we're going to start with Molly, and then we're going to go into some Q&A. So start to think about some of those questions that you might want to have. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first chatted with Molly a few months ago. I think it's going to be a stellar conversation. And without further ado, let's play the introductory video for Molly. Give her a round of applause.
I'm Molly Bloom. Do you know about me? This is a true story.
You ran games in LA for roughly 8 years?
Yeah.
And then you ran games in New York for roughly 2.
I haven't run a game in over 2 years, not to spoil the ending. But that's when the government raided my game and took all of my money, assuming all of it was made illegally, which it wasn't. In this room, you couldn't buy your win.
I'm all in.
You couldn't buy me, and you couldn't buy a seat at the table.
Movie stars, athletes, billionaires, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You're not taking a percentage of the pot?
No.
Keep it that way because you don't want to break the law when you're breaking the law.
Am I breaking the law?
Not really.
We're able to find out for sure, aren't we? Laws are written down.
You had meetings in LA about your broken life rights.
I did.
You spent 8 years running the world's most exclusive, glamorous, and decadent man cave.
Any offers?
Guarantee the publishers certain elements, and I can get you $1.5 million.
What kind of elements? I passed.
I'm just curious as to why you passed on what would appear to be the only way out you have.
You have to use real names.
Creative differences. The law that I'm accused of breaking defines gambling as betting on games of chance.
Yes.
Poker isn't a game of chance. Poker's a game of skill.
Why does a young woman who, at 22, has a gold-plated resume, why does she run poker games?
Your risk is nuts. You're gonna get blown up.
You got 2.8 million on the street right now. That money should be in your hands.
Just how deep into the Russian mob were you? There's a new offer on the table. Complete immunity. We hand over the hard drive.
You've seen what's on those hard drives. Families, lives, careers will be ruined.
Why are you in this alone? Where are the people you're protecting by not telling the whole story?
It's not their names. I'm protecting Charlie. It's mine.
Tell me why!
Because it's all I have left. Because it's my name.
Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here. Before I sit down for a conversation and a Q&A, I wanted to just kind of give you the cliff notes. Because at first blush, it might seem a little strange that a woman who ran an ultimately illegal underground high-stakes poker game could have anything to do with Cresta. I think that's a pretty fair question, and I'd like to really address that as soon as I get up here. At the end of the day, when you strip away the details, the mob, the feds, the $100 million poker game, what you have is a story that none of us seem to escape, is what do you do when things fall apart? Because things do fall apart, sometimes overnight. And we're left with the wreckage, the confusion, the fear, and the choice to either stay where we are, to stay down, or to get up and fight. And I think this story at the end of the day is about fighting. There have been some pretty significant chapters of my life in which the world has created adversity or I've created adversity for myself. And some of those have been extreme. And I've been on these stages long enough where I walk off and I get to talk to people and I get to hear their stories. And my mind every time is blown because human beings go through a lot. We all have these stories of having to reinvent ourselves. And so what's so meaningful to me is to not just tell the story, but to talk about the blueprint for how to survive these moments where everything seems like it's over forever. And not only survive them, but to keep ourselves open to new opportunities, and open to falling in love with the world over and over again. It's not enough to just weather the storms. We have to stay involved in humanity, continue to care for people, and continue to see the good parts of the world. Otherwise, what's it all for? So I just want to briefly kind of go through these chapters of ruination, if you will, talk about what I learned, and then really get into how it all connects. So the first fundamental lesson that I learned in my life, I learned from my ski career. I loved mogul skiing. My brothers and I loved mogul skiing. And we started doing it just for fun, and then we started competing casually. And we started winning, standing on those podiums. We kind of got bitten by that bug. And my life changed really radically at 12. I had to have this surgery for scoliosis, in which the doctor told me he was going to fuse my top 11 vertebrae together, 2 metal rods down the side. And I remember sitting in that office waiting to ask the question that was burning a hole in my head, and that was, okay, when can I get back on the snow? And he looked at me in this dismissive way, and he said, you're going to have a good life, and you'll be able to do a lot of things, but you're going to have to find a new hobby. And in that moment, I got angry. But in that moment, I also became clear about something. This person knows a lot about scoliosis, but this person doesn't know anything about me. And so to just completely outsource my dream and my potential to someone who has met me one time and just looks at the whole data set and makes a choice based on that seemed like I was really letting myself down. So against medical advice, against my parents' wishes, I got back on the snow about a year later. And it was really hard. Physically, it was difficult, but mentally, it was near impossible. Because I, for the first time in my life, was met with that inner dialogue that was filled with fear and doubt, and just in a consistent, sort of relentless fashion, told me that everyone was watching me fail, So I decided to ask my dad what to do. My dad's a psychologist. If any of you have grown up with a psychologist, you can feel my pain. As a teenager, you get away with nothing, but as an adult, it's great to have a 24-hour on-call therapist. I said to my dad, I don't know what to do. I've got this voice in my head. I'm filled with fear. And he said something to me that would change the trajectory of my life forever. He said, Molly, your problem is not that you have this voice in your head. Your problem is that you're listening to it. You're listening to it like it is gospel, like it is truth, and you're not fighting back. And this introduced me to this concept that we are able to observe with practice. Observe this inner dialogue, observe fear, observe the desire to take shortcuts or to be unkind. And with practice, we can observe it and then decide how we want to act, which gives us so much agency, so much more agency. And so I learned about meditation, I learned about mindfulness from a lot of sports psychologists, and this is the most fundamental skill and practice that I have used in my life to be able to pivot, reinvent, and really survive the earth school, if you will. I ended up at 19 making the US ski team, and at 20 being ranked 3rd overall in North America, and at 21 making it to the Olympic qualifiers. And I stood on top of that mountain thinking, this is the moment of my life. This is the moment I have dreamt about and sacrificed for, and I would have never been here if I would have let this person who knows a lot about the data set of spinal surgeries and scoliosis, but doesn't know what's inside of me. I would have never had this moment. And I got on course, and unfortunately, a really unlucky thing happened. I was having a great run, and I skied over this little piece of pine bough. My ski pre-released 20 feet in the air, and I fell really hard, and that was the end of my ski career. I decided that I wanted to take a year off because I didn't know who I was without skiing, and I wanted to go somewhere warm because I'd been freezing cold since I was 2 years old. And so I decided to go to LA to try to find myself, which if I could go back in time and tell my 20-year-old self, if you're looking to try to find yourself, please don't go to LA. I would, but there I was. And then in a strange series of events, I ended up waitressing at this poker game. I didn't know anything about poker. I went home and Googled what kind of music do poker players like to listen to and what do they eat, and I made the world's most embarrassing playlist with songs like The Gambler on it. And showed up to this game, and in walks some of the most famous people in the world, A-list movie stars, the head of one of the biggest movie studios, people from the tech world that were incredibly famous and changing the world, politicians, I mean, you name it. And I was absolutely fascinated by this room. But I also was so intimidated and desperately wanted to have access to this information and capital and power and this network, but didn't know how to do that. Didn't know what my value proposition was. And so I talked to my mom and my dad, and they both have wisdom in their own rights. My mom is all about integrity. My dad is all about study human behavior and overcome fear. And so I started to try to understand how to meaningfully connect and engage with these people. And it turns out that it was much more simple than I would have imagined. Be trustworthy. Listen to discover instead of listening to respond. Practice empathy. It wasn't so much about charisma as it was about cultivating real trust with people. And even though these people were some of the most famous and powerful in the world, this worked so well that I ultimately started my own games, and my game became the go-to game in Hollywood. I was making millions of dollars, doing it legally. I was learning about the world from some of the people who were actively involved in shaping culture. I had these moments in the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons where pouring out $1 million on the bed. I mean, I was 24 years old. It was really fun. Then I expanded to New York City, and my games got huge. I saw someone lose $100 million in one night. I kept building, I kept scaling, and something changed in me fundamentally. I really was raised to have this very strong, rigid moral center. And I didn't leave that overnight. I didn't go from being a really serious student and athlete to running what became ultimately underground high-stakes poker games and letting people play and watching their lives come apart. It happened by making small, little incremental decisions that were just a little left of my center. And those compounded, and I woke up one day in New York City and had no idea who I was, what I stood for, other than money. In New York, I had a run-in with the Italian mob, the Russian mob, the feds. Ultimately, it all blew up. The feds seized all my assets, and a couple years later, showed up in the middle of the night with machine guns and high-beam flashlights and arrested me. They put this piece of paper in front of me that said the United States of America versus Molly Bloom. I ultimately found an attorney to represent me, and the prosecutors wanted they wanted me to do a cooperation deal. They were willing to give me all my money back, which was a lot, and they were willing to give me a deferred prosecution to keep me out of prison. But I had been on the other side. I had been somebody whose soul was for sale. And what I had to do to reclaim that part of myself is I had to look at this situation and know that it was entirely my fault. I had made all these decisions, and here I was. So ultimately, I decided to not take the deal, and I waited to get sentenced. And I got really lucky. I got a judge that was very disappointed with my life choices, but who decided to not put me in jail. But there I was, 35 years old, millions of dollars in debt, a convicted felon, kind of a social pariah. The tabloids are telling a pretty reductive tale. And I've got one brother who is a two-time Olympian and played in the NFL and was an Abercrombie model and started a charity for old people, granting wishes for them, and then started and sold a tech company at the exact highest valuation time, and now is the CEO of the X Games. And my other brother is a Harvard-educated cardiothoracic surgeon at Massachusetts General. So I was the family felon. And I'm like, this cannot be the way this story ends. So I decided that I would retell the story. And I got a small little book deal after 1 million rejections because they all wanted a celebrity hit piece. And I was like, no, there's a better story about a girl from Loveland, Colorado trying to find herself. And they're like, pass. Finally, I got this book deal. I published my book and I waited for my life to change. And I think 10 people read it and 9 of them were related to me. So then I knew I had to do something audacious, even though all I wanted to do was disappear from society. I knew I had to take this bold risk. I knew I had to because I'd watched people play poker, and I'd watched them after they got a bad beat, after they made all the right decisions and still lost their money. I watched them stay on the rails. And I kept books on people, and over time, these people lost the game. And so I knew I had to take a big risk, and so I made a short list of the most successful filmmakers in Hollywood. And at the top of that list was Aaron Sorkin for me, highest paid screenwriter in the world. And so I finally, after being so relentless and so annoying to so many people, I got a meeting with him. And I flew to LA, and I told him my story. And I was so nervous before I walked in there, and I was like, what am I doing? I live with my mom. My book sold 10 copies. And then I just, chin up. And when I was done, he said something really funny. He looked at me with this kind of amused expression, and he said, well, I'll tell you one thing, kid. I've never met someone so down on their luck and so full of themselves. And my takeaway there, and the last thing I'll say, is be full of yourself anyway. When you've made bad mistakes, take responsibility. When the world has served you injustice, don't look for the evidence outside of yourself, inside of yourself. Just keep going. Just keep fighting. Because what I learned from all of this is we don't just get one shot. We get as many shots as we're brave enough to take. And I know that for sure. So thank you for listening. I think we're going to do the little fireside chat now, and then I'll be around to sign some books after. Thank you so much.
Okay. What an incredible introduction. I thought my life was interesting. I think your life is a lot more interesting. What a story. Molly, I'm excited to dive in. We're going to be talking a little bit about resilience, about courage, about leadership, about reinventing yourself. So I'm excited to dive in a little bit. We don't have a ton of time, so I think we just go straight into the deep end, right? And you walk through some of the really tough parts of your life in that, you were an Olympic caliber skier and you developed scoliosis. You had your LA poker game, which was generating millions of dollars that you apparently were throwing on your bed and looking at, taken away from you effectively. Yeah. You've had the mob point a gun to your head. What gave you, what was the mindset around overcoming those obstacles and reinventing yourself?
Yeah, I think we train in different contexts. If we want to learn a musical instrument, we train in that skill. We go to school to train our minds to hopefully think critically. And in sports, you start out with no skills and you develop skills. And I don't think we do enough or focused enough on training the mind. The mind in its natural state wants to avoid discomfort at all costs and pursue pleasure, which makes resilience, reinvention, all these things quite challenging.
Yeah.
Another thing at our set point is the mind believes, unless we do work, that uncertainty is a metabolically unsustainable state, that the body will start to break down if it remains in a state of uncertainty. So then what it does is it forages for some kind of subjective truth, clings to that, puts it in a category, and doesn't want to think about it again. And there is no such thing as certainty. And so because of all these factors, and I could go into so many more, cognitive bias, et cetera, I think that training the mind is the most important thing we can do. And so the way that I look at that is the practice that has the most scientific validation in terms of how to actually change and upgrade this base model is meditation, which I hated to read that because it's very hard. But I started very small, 30 seconds the first day, and I kept building the skill. And I am astounded at how useful and how profound of a performance tool meditation is, because what you do is you give yourself the ability to place your focus exactly where you want to place it. So when you sit down to meditate, you put your focus on the breath and the mind starts going, and you listen to what goes on in your head all day, and you're like, no wonder I'm a mess, you know? But you can start to become aware of that and either mute it a little bit, dismiss it, come back to the breath, and then that allows you, when you need to make a big shift, when you're in these moments of uncertainty, when there's a ton of noise externally, it allows you to kind of come to this place of reality and be in the present moment and make decisions based on, you know, the information you have, as opposed to the catastrophic thinking of the future or the nostalgic thinking of the past.
Yeah, just being present, right?
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to start meditation, you might start at 30 seconds on day one.
For sure.
What does that look like now for you?
For me, I minimum 20 minutes.
Wow.
Sometimes an hour. I have a 3.5-year-old, so I got to do a lot of work on my brain. She's terrifying. The only thing that scares me, way scarier than the mob or the feds,
Oh, yeah.
is my daughter Fiona. So, you know, at times where it's a little bit more challenging, I really lean into meditation, but it's helped me to overcome anxiety, depression, postpartum depression. You know, I can't attribute it enough value to it. I love Waking Up, the app by Sam Harris, because it takes away the woo-woo, right? Because he's a neuroscientist, and it really, I think, teaches the skills in the way that we're discussing here. But yeah, 30 seconds the first day. A lot of people try to tell you 20 minutes. That's like an actual eternity to sit with your thoughts alone if this is not something that you've engaged in.
Okay, so we're hosting our first ever event here at Crest Wave. And I'm probably going to need a little bit of meditation coming out of this thing. So I'll start with 30 seconds tomorrow.
Just 30 seconds. Yeah. Then you get to show up and, you know, get that dopamine hit from showing up, but it's not that much effort.
Exactly. So you're clearly somebody, Molly, you're a daughter of a psychologist. You're somebody who knows, you know, humans really well. And that actually led you to, I think, be really, really successful in running some of those games in LA and in New York. I'm going to ask one AI and customer experience related question, and we're going to get off of the topic. We must, I guess, right? We're at Wave, right? That's exactly what we do. What do you think that folks should take away in terms of how the customer experience is going to evolve in this kind of like new age of AI?
I think that it's a really exciting time when you think about the interplay between AI and humans, because, you know, like I was talking about before, you can have this large data set, like my surgeon did, right? He looks at 1,000 people with scoliosis and what their capabilities are, right? But he disregarded the specific personal element. And so I think AI is really good at efficiency, which is an excellent thing to be good at when you're dealing with human beings, because it cuts down on frustration.
Yeah.
I think it's really good at understanding big universal concepts and big data sets, but I think that there's something very special and specific about human to human. The nuances that you notice. I mean, we have these mirror neurons that when you're talking to someone else, your brains can actually network together. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, but I don't think AI is going to be able to do that. Maybe it will, but I do think it's a really exciting time to kind of improve efficiency and then also have more time to be present with people, to focus on the humanity of it all, as opposed to trying to get the information, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we talk a lot about what AI is going to unlock, which is like a new type of human conversation, right? Where folks don't have to do kind of like the mundane things.
Right.
They don't have to search for information and stuff like that, but they can focus more on the end customer. And so I think you're speaking a lot to that future state, which we totally believe in at Cresta as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's always so nice when you're speaking to someone in customer service and it doesn't feel like this formal, weird interaction. You can lighten up and you can, just be very human about it because you have someone that's doing the formal work for you, right? And then you just make it more and more human.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned in your introduction, like all of the interesting people that were at some of these games. I mean, I won't make you say it, right? But there's people like Tobey Maguire there, right? But also some of the world's largest, tech leaders and from tech companies, finance companies, and you were watching them make decisions, really tough decisions all the time, and you were watching really interesting conversations happening at the poker table.
For sure.
We have a room full of leaders here that have to make tough decisions all of the time. What did you take away from observing a lot of those conversations, being part of those conversations that you might want to share with some of the audience here today?
Absolutely. So, first let's just talk about because poker is an interesting context to look at decision making through because you see immediate outcomes. And so the people that did that really well, they knew the data, they knew, sort of what their decision was, and they didn't allow for their emotions or the drama at the table to move them off of that decision that they knew that they were going to make. They had intellectual humility in that, they could be pot committed, as we call it, have invested a ton of money in the beginning. The tides turn, they're able to change directions. So it really is, again, kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, this ability to know who you are, to continually learn and watch your mind and learn how to use it skillfully, as opposed to be taken for a ride by the emotions, by the social dynamics. And so this is just another reason why I think being able to sit with yourself, being able to be completely honest with yourself about where your weaknesses and strengths are, and being willing to work on that, and being willing to know who you are, and to be misunderstood if necessary, and to just be very steadfast and have top-down control. And so those were the people that consistently won. Again, like I said, a lot of people, when they would get a bad beat, meaning they got their money in right, they made the right decision, and sometimes life just happens like that. They would get so many people, the majority of them would get so affected by how that felt that they would stay on the ropes. Right. And they would miss out on opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. So again, this comes down to how good are you at being able to feel things and then let it go and restart, and pivot, and and have that awareness, that self-awareness, to continually make the right decision, because over time you're going to win.
Right.
But there are going to be times where you don't, and just building up resilience to that.
Yeah. Yeah, trust the data, know yourself, be adaptable.
For sure.
Are there any poker players out here in the room? Go ahead and raise your hand. Couple. I feel like very sheepishly raising your hand. It's okay.
This is a phenomenon that happens to me every time I ask if people play poker. They're like, should I tell her? Like, is she gonna try to like pull me into a game in the back room? I'm in retirement.
Yeah.
I learned my lesson.
All is good. You raise your hand proudly. It's all good. But for those of you who do play poker, you know very well there's nothing more that drives more intellectual humility than losing out after your opponent has a 5% chance. So yeah,
Yep.
I'm sure that you witness a ton of that. You also witness people like face kind of tremendous pressure, and I think you have some really interesting perspectives around being courageous. Like, how would you define courageous leadership for all of the leaders in the room, in 2025 and beyond?
So something I learned from, like I said, going from a young girl who had an overdeveloped conscience. If I lied to my parents, I'd be up all night with a stomach ache, to running the biggest underground high-stakes gambling crime syndicate, is that there's a fragility to us, and it's a very real phenomenon that we have both the moral and the immoral within us. And again, I think anytime you want to be able to be good at something that's hard, and having integrity in all moments is hard. And so what I learned is that I've got to sit down and do some thinking about who I want to be in the world. And what are my non-negotiables, and what are my values, and at the end of it all, what do I want to be known for, And then I've got to check in on that, nightly, weekly, monthly. And so I think being a courageous leader is not being perfect, but being honest with yourself and being willing to make the changes that you need to make, and being willing to be misunderstood. Because it's the longer game,
Right.
It's the longer route, and there's all this pressure to just think bottom line, think this, and so to be a leader with integrity is not always going to be the most popular move, but it's unquestionably the long game. I mean, it really is, and then also being willing to say I don't know. All this pressure for leaders to be super certain and know everything, and the world is changing so fast right now that nobody really does know. And so having that humility, and then also, trusting, being willing to give people agency, and be kind and compassionate and exercise empathy. But really, again, it's about being super self-aware and having this value system that you place before all else. And if you stray away from that, being willing to go back.
Yeah, I'm somebody who believes deeply in having a personal mission.
Yeah.
Personal mission that I can check in on at the end of the day after I've gone through the entirety of the day, and wake up in the next morning and say to myself to help drive that courage, right? So that totally resonates with me. We've got around 15 minutes here, folks. For the next 10 minutes or so, I want to go into audience Q&A. So does anybody have any questions that they might want to ask Molly? Let's go back to the back, and then we'll come to the front.
What was the most reckless bet you saw?
Okay, well, the night that someone lost $100 million, he was playing poker on the table, playing backgammon behind the table, betting on everything you could possibly bet on, including Kobayashi, the hot dog eating champion. Every game. I mean, it was just a bonanza. And by this time I was the bank for these games. And so after 10 million, even though he was a billionaire, I was like, I'm out, right? Like, whatever you guys are doing on the side, you're doing on the side. And it was a 48-hour game. And so it's literally impossible for me to choose the most reckless, irresponsible bet because every single one of them was. But the net, I mean, at the end of the 2 days, he had lost $100 million.
Holy smokes. I'm terrified to go to any of your games. All right, we had one question up here. Mike's coming for you.
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to do that now.
Why not?
It's fine. So you talked about your core and how you sort of shifted and that you've reinvented yourself and you've pivoted. And I'm curious, who are you?
Woo! I want to
joke?
Are you sure you don't want to tell the joke? I think that it's not a one and done. I think that I'm continually evolving, and it's really hard for me to choose identifiers, right? But I know for sure that I know what I care about. I care about being a good mom. I believe that it's a really big responsibility and not one I take lightly. I care about putting power into the hands of women and girls deeply. I care about being independent financially. And I care about showing up for the people that I hurt, like my parents, consistently for the rest of their life. Because after I became a parent, I called my mom and dad and I was like, oh my God, I am so sorry. Like, I am so, what? You just don't realize. And I desperately want to start something again, but I'm going to wait till my daughter's in school full time because I get pretty myopic about things. And that's really hard for me. But I think the best we can do is to continue to kind of be honest with ourselves and also be forgiving of ourselves. I mean, there are two really important things that I needed to do to have a comeback after I had burned my life to the ground, and one was to accept full responsibility for it all. I did this. I had client loyalty. I had near perfect information on the laws. I had all these opportunities, and I made this decision. It's mine, and which is ultimately why I chose to not become a confidential informant. But then I also, and this was just as important, I had to figure out how to forgive myself, which is a very hard thing to do, particularly according to the research for teenagers and for women. And so, you know, both of those things were equally important. And, you know, that they also just taught me, all these experiences taught me that it's in experience that you live. It's not, I mean, science tells us that we spend 50% of our time, and I think that's a low number, in the future, in the past. Trying to predict the future, trying to pull from the past. These are obviously important sort of things to consider, but the only time I've ever learned anything or ever gotten from point A to point B is in the experience. So to just continue to show up and try to, you know, like just have this curiosity over fear and to continue to try to get better and be better is kind of my mantra. But I don't know if I'll ever be able to just sum up who I am, you know? Like on some days I'm an effing disaster, and some days I'm like, you know, killing it.
That's probably one of the most difficult questions I've ever heard in an audience Q&A. That's awesome.
You put me on the spot, Russ.
No, I love it. I just kept talking, trying to get there, though. Like, maybe if I just keep saying words, I'll figure it out.
Awesome. Other questions, folks?
Anything else would be easy.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Thank you. Made me think. Hurt my brain.
Hey, Molly. The movie...
Hi.
Hi. The movie was obviously a big exposure point for you to a lot of people, for you to share your story, and I think you were obviously very close to the development of the movie as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything that was left on the cutting floor
Oh.
that you wish could have stayed in the movie because it articulated an aspect of yourself or an aspect of the story that could have given more context about who you are or what really happened?
Love that.
Great question. I have two answers to that. One is light and one's a little heavier. So I had this beagle for 21 years, and she was like my soulmate and my sidekick. And she didn't make it into the movie. And Aaron and I became great friends because I got to work with him for 8 months. And I was like, you gotta put Lucy the beagle in the movie. And he's like, I cannot make a movie about a badass woman who's running underground poker games and her like sidekick that's a beagle. That's fair. I guess so most of the movie really followed the events. There was the biggest change that I would make is in that scene with my dad, towards the end. My dad and I had a tough relationship growing up. I always believed he loved my brothers more than he loved me. They were kind of prodigies early on, and they also were goody two-shoes. They caused no issues, and I was kind of like a full-time pain in the ass. And so I thought he liked them better, maybe because they were boys, maybe because they were better at the things that he cared about. And so we had a tough relationship, and he used to write me handwritten letters every year while I was running these games, begging me to do something different, telling me it was not going to end well. So when I got arrested by the FBI, he got mad at me. And, in that moment, I said, I just need my dad, So we didn't speak for a year, and everyone thought I was going to go to prison. So he called me right before I was going to get sentenced, and he said, you're my firstborn and my only daughter, and we're going to work this out. And it didn't happen in Central Park. I didn't sell a Chanel glove for an ice skate. We did spend 3 days, and I finally got up the courage to ask him this question that truly had weighed very heavily on me my whole life, which is, why do you love my brothers more than you love me? And his answer was different than it was in the movie. His answer, I think, is really meaningful. He got really emotional when I asked him that. And he said, I don't love your brothers more than I love you. There are times where I've liked them better, which is fair. But he said, I have been, a therapist for 40 years, and I've seen the world, and I think it's hard, and I think it's harder for girls and women, and I wanted to make you tough. And so for decades, I had colored in the missing information in my head with this story. And I'd brought that out into the world, and that was most certainly part of this psychotic drive to matter, And in that moment, I saw my dad for who he was, and I saw the truth. And we were able to build a fantastic relationship on that moment. And so, I think there's a lot in that movie about taking big risks and everything, but the biggest, scariest risks sometimes are in relationships, and in asking those questions and having those conversations. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't wait till it was too late. So I think that would be the only thing that I really felt I would have liked to have in the movie. And Lucy, but,
I wish it was in the movie as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And a good reminder to not wait until it's too late.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have time for probably one last question. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to ask? Yeah, up here.
Molly, first up, this is an incredible story. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Question on trust, right? Thinking about what I do on a daily basis, I rely on a lot of people, our ecosystem. If you think back at what you were kind of involved with and what you had going, how did you deal with trust? Because you had to actually completely rely on folks to get a lot of these things done. How did you process it? How did you trust folks? And if you can share some thoughts on that.
how did I trust people, or how did I get people to trust me, or both?
Actually, both.
Okay. So I didn't trust people. I trusted people to act according to their nature. And so when I was doing my job well before, towards the end, when I stopped respecting myself, when I knew that my core of who I was had been usurped by greed and status and all that stuff, that was a different story. Then I went down a road of self-destruction. But for the most part, when I was doing my job well, I got as much data as I possibly could about someone. This is probably not legal, but I'm sure the statute of limitations are passed. I used to pay people at banks to give me information on people's liquidity, because in LA, people drove a Lamborghini, but they rented an apartment in the valley. Like, it was a lot of people who were trying to scam you, et cetera, especially in this game. And so I relied on getting as much information as I could. Then I started to understand leverage. I started to understand that if I had the best product in town, it wasn't replicable, right? 9 seats, people you could sit next to that would change your life forever, no pros in the game, guaranteed that you're gonna get paid, et cetera, that people would, if they could afford it, they would want to come to this game consistently, so they would have to pay their debts. The second thing is if you stiffed this game, it was reputational suicide. So then I started to understand leverage. And then I started just making decisions based on that. And if I was unsure about someone, they would have to post. It was tricky, though, because even though these were very, very rich people, they would go on tilt. And so there was a very delicate balance of how much ammunition do I give them and when do I cut them off. These were all important lessons to learn. And the way that I cultivated trust was by being trustworthy, by holding myself to this standard. And there, as you've seen recent press releases on the gambling world, it's a very shady, very tricky world. And so, in those moments where I was given an opportunity in the short term to make money, for instance, letting a pro in who would give me a free roll, meaning I have no downside, only upside, right? Or getting someone being able to buy their way into the game or something. To be able to say no to that, even though it's leaving money on the table, and believe that, that doing the right thing is the way, becomes the reputation you have. It either will open the doors for you or shut them on your face. And so I don't think there's any shortcuts to cultivating trust with people. And I think it's something that we have to consistently stay on top of and look at.
Awesome. And in closing, I've got one more question for you, Molly. You're somebody who's now a best-selling author, so I think framing the question in this way is probably the right way to do it. If you were to write the next chapter of Molly Bloom, what would be next?
So I'm really focused on, I have a daughter, and I'm really focused on trying to prepare her for the world. The second thing that I have to do before I'm done here is I absolutely need to build something that puts power into the hands of, teaches power, empowers women and girls. My life will not feel complete if I don't make moves on that in a real way. Those are my 2 big points, and I want to be, I want to be there for my friends and my family and the people that were ride or die through this whole thing, who were Aaron Sorkin, like all these people I became great friends with, the people that showed up for me, because everyone will show up for you when you're on the top, But when it all falls apart, the people that have your back for the rest of my life, like whatever they need, you know.
Yeah. Be an incredible mother, be an incredible friend, and make change in the world. I think that's very admirable. Folks, let's give it up for Molly Bloom. The chair doesn't want me to leave.
I know.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
All right, so everyone, we are at the end of Wave, and I want to give a round of applause to all of you. So Cresta team, give a round of applause to all of our attendees. As much as, again, I shared this a little bit earlier, as much as, again, like the stage was really exciting, and I think hopefully folks learned a lot along the way. I think the community that we made, the knowledge that we shared amongst one another was a very, very special part of our first inaugural Wave. And now I can't wait for, obviously, the change that's to come with regards to customer experience and AI that now this room is equipped to take forward into their organizations, but also for future iterations of Wave. Just to wrap us up here, a couple of things in terms of housekeeping. One is that we will have grab-and-go lunch for you. That's going to be in our normal lunchroom, breakout room D. If you want to meet Molly, take a photo, we're going to have some books over there as well. If you want to grab her book and get it signed, we'll have those available for you in that same room. And until next time, that's it for Cresta Wave. Take care, everybody.